There were velvet chairs, marble floors, and tension thick enough to slice with a letter opener. Everyone sat in the grand room of the Grant estate, facing a single man in a grey suit, Harold Grant's long-time attorney. The chandelier didn't flicker, the clock didn't tick, but every heart in that room did. Harold Ellis Grant, billionaire, fashion mogul, and family enigma, had passed away last Tuesday, and today was about the will. Thomas Grant, the eldest son, leaned forward first, the air of someone used to winning. "Let's get on with it," he muttered, checking his Rolex like the outcome was already written. Marie, the daughter, sat poised in a cream silk dress, hands folded neatly, lips tight. Joel, the youngest, fidgeted with his phone, biting his nail down to the quick. They weren't grieving, they were waiting. But someone else sat near the back, quiet, in a modest navy dress. Her name was Ivy Ellis. Most in the room hadn't noticed her, or had forgotten. But she noticed them. Every sideways glance, every forced smile. She wasn't family, not by blood. She was Harold's niece, barely remembered. But he had remembered her. The lawyer cleared his throat. Mr. Grant did not leave behind a formal will. Chairs creaked, eyes narrowed. Instead, he left behind a recording. He pulled a small device from his case and pressed play. Harold's voice filled the room, calm, steady, unmistakable. "If you're hearing this, I've likely passed on. And if you're all sitting there wondering what you're getting, well, that's exactly why I didn't leave a piece of paper. Because I didn't want you to fight over what I wrote. I wanted to know who you were, when nothing was guaranteed. So I made no will, no safe, no vault. But I did leave something behind." A long pause. "And someone already has it." Silence. Joel looked up, confused. Marie turned toward Thomas. Thomas stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. From the back of the room, Ivy lowered her eyes. She didn't smile. But her hand reached into her coat pocket and gently touched a folded piece of paper. Old. Creased. With handwriting only she and Harold would recognize. You could almost hear the silence breathing. Thomas sat up straighter in his seat, clearing his throat like he was about to argue in court. "There must be a mistake," he said. "Dad wouldn't leave us with nothing." Marie blinked slowly. Her voice was softer, but not gentler. "Are you saying he gave everything away without telling us?" Joel didn't say anything, not yet. His eyes stayed on Ivy. She hadn't moved. She just sat there, still in her navy dress, her fingers now resting on that folded paper, like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. The lawyer spoke again. "Mr. Grant made it very clear there is no legal will, but he did leave a message for Ivy." He turned to her now gently. "If you'd like to step outside, we can—" But Ivy shook her head. "No, it's okay. I'd rather hear it here." Everyone turned to face her now, really see her for the first time. Joel squinted. "Wait, Ivy? You mean little Ivy from Charleston, the one who used to draw in the kitchen?" Marie's voice followed, a little sharper. "Didn't she leave when she was, 10, 12? Ivy nodded. "I was 11 after my father died." Her voice was steady, but her hand gripped the paper tighter. "Uncle Harold took me in for a year. Then I went to live with my mother's side." Thomas leaned back in his chair, the tension in his jaw returning. "And now what? You show up, and suddenly Dad leaves you everything?" "He didn't leave me everything," Ivy replied. "He just left me what mattered to him." No one spoke. Marie looked at Joel. Joel looked away. In that moment, the air changed. Not loud, not dramatic, but something cracked, just a little. In the corner of the room, a painting hung crooked. No one noticed it before. But Harold had once said, "When a painting shifts, it means the house is moving." Now it had begun. Later that afternoon, the guests had trickled out, murmuring their condolences like they were part of a script. Some stayed just long enough to be seen. Some didn't even finish their coffee. But Ivy stayed. So did the quiet. The lawyer had gone. The room felt bigger without him. Colder, too. Thomas stood near the window, arms crossed, staring out at the driveway like he was expecting someone to drive up and say this was all a mistake. Marie sat in the same spot, perfectly still, her hands now unclasped and restless. She wasn't angry, not yet. She was calculating. Joel paced near the fireplace, the hem of his shirt half untucked, his phone locked and forgotten in his pocket. Finally, it was Marie who spoke. "So, what did he leave you?" Her voice was calm, but the kind of calm that had an edge. Ivy hesitated. Then she gently unfolded the paper from her coat pocket. It wasn't official, not notarized. Just a single piece of old stationery, yellowed with time, Harold's name printed neatly at the top, and in his handwriting, soft, firm, unmistakably his, "To Ivy, you saw me when no one else did. When I had everything, you brought nothing but love. When I had nothing, you gave me time. This house, this studio, the garden, they meant something to me because of you. Keep what reminds you of peace, sell what brings you pain, and plant something new where old things end." Ivy didn't cry, but her eyes looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from holding everything in for years. Joel finally broke the silence. "So, is that it? That's all he gave?" Ivy looked up. "It's more than I ever asked for." Marie blinked. Thomas scoffed, almost under his breath. "He raised us, he built this for us, and now you—" "He built this," Ivy interrupted softly, "but did you ever ask him what he wanted for it?" There was a pause, not because they agreed, but because none of them had ever asked that. Not once, and now they weren't sure if they still had the chance to. That night, the mansion was too quiet. Even the creaking floorboards seemed to be holding their breath. Ivy sat at the kitchen table, a cup of chamomile tea between her hands, steam curling gently upward. The lights were dim, the kind Harold used to prefer, soft, not cold. She wasn't sure if she should stay the night, but something about leaving didn't feel right either. Upstairs, behind a half-closed door, Thomas spoke into his phone in hushed tones. "No formal will, just a letter," he whispered. "Yeah, handwritten, emotional nonsense. Can it be challenged, quietly?" A pause. "No, she doesn't even want the money. That's the problem. She has the house now, and the studio. If she holds it, she controls it." His voice dropped lower. "Find out what we can do. I want that studio back under Grant name." He ended the call, jaw tight, not out of greed, but out of pride. He didn't know what Ivy meant to Harold, and that made him uncomfortable. Meanwhile, in the guest room, Marie was sitting at the vanity, not brushing her hair, just staring into the mirror. She looked tired, not in the way makeup could fix. "She's not a bad girl," she murmured to herself, "just in the way." She pulled open a drawer and took out an old photo. Harold, in his younger years, standing between her and Thomas, hands on their shoulders. Joel had been too young then. Ivy wasn't in the picture, but Marie remembered that summer. It was the year Harold stopped calling her sweetheart. The year Ivy moved in, even if just for a little while. Marie folded the photo gently and placed it face down. Joel, in the downstairs lounge, had poured himself a drink. He wasn't usually the first to act, but he noticed things. He noticed Ivy's shoes by the door, worn but clean. He noticed the way she looked at Harold's painting in the hallway, like she saw something no one else did. And he noticed something else. "She's not after the money," he said quietly, mostly to himself. "She already got what she came for." He took a sip. "That makes her the most dangerous one here." Outside the window it began to rain. Not a storm, just enough to make the leaves tap against the glass. Ivy stood by the window in the kitchen now, holding Harold's note in her hands. She wasn't afraid, but she wasn't at peace either. Somewhere upstairs, the old house creaked again, as if it, too, was listening. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the lace curtains, laying soft patterns across the wooden floor. Ivy woke early. Not from habit, but from the weight of presence. Being in Harold's house again, it didn't feel like inheritance, it felt like responsibility. She wandered into the old art studio. The smell of linseed oil still lingered. Half-finished canvases leaned gently against the walls. A table sat by the window, cluttered with brushes, pens, bits of lace, and old fabric swatches. It hadn't changed. She ran her fingers over a small ceramic bird Harold once sculpted, cracked at the wing, but still standing. "He never fixed it," Ivy whispered. "He said some things aren't meant to be perfect." In the hallway, Thomas watched her from a distance. He hadn't meant to follow. He told himself he was just walking. But now he was standing there, arms folded, looking at the girl who'd quietly unsettled the ground beneath their feet. "You know," he said casually, "Dad used to say this place would be yours one day." Ivy turned. She didn't smile. "He said that to you?" Thomas gave a short shrug. "He said a lot of things." She nodded, looking back toward the windows. "He didn't say it to me. He just left the key under the mat." That silence again. Not angry, just revealing. Thomas walked in slowly. "Look, Ivy, we're not villains. We just didn't expect this." "I didn't expect it either," she replied. "But maybe Harold did." Downstairs, Marie was setting the breakfast table. She didn't usually do this herself, but the staff hadn't shown up today. Maybe they weren't sure who was in charge anymore. She placed the silverware down gently, one by one. Her hands shook slightly. Joel entered, yawning, rubbing the back of his neck. "Is this brunch or a family summit?" Marie didn't look up. "It's a chance to talk, before things twist too far." Joel poured himself coffee. I don't think Ivy's here to twist anything. No, Marie said softly, but maybe she'll be the reason we twist ourselves. Upstairs again, Ivy stood in front of Harold's favourite canvas, a painting of a field he never named. She touched the edge of the frame and whispered. You knew this would break them open. She didn't mean to say it aloud. But sometimes, when a house is old enough, it echoes back, late morning. The family gathered around the breakfast table, not by choice, but because no one wanted to be the first to walk away. The table was full, warm scones, fruit, fresh eggs, but no one touched anything. Joel scrolled aimlessly through his phone. Marie stirred her tea long after the sugar had dissolved. Thomas sat rigid, as if waiting for someone to make a move he could react to. And Ivy sat quietly at the end of the table, like she didn't belong, but also like she wasn't trying to. So, Marie began, her voice light, almost too practiced. What are your plans, Ivy? The room stilled. Ivy looked up. I haven't decided, I just got here. Of course, Marie smiled. Just curious. It's not every day someone inherits a house like this. Thomas added without looking up. Or a legacy she barely knew. Joel glanced sideways. He didn't say anything, but the comment hung in the air. Ivy didn't flinch. I didn't come here for the legacy. I came because he asked me to. He's not here anymore, Thomas replied, flat. That doesn't mean he stopped speaking, she answered softly. Silence. Not angry, not confrontational, just weighty. Marie sipped her tea, her hands now still. Joel finally set down his phone. Look, none of us expected this. We're not trying to push you out, Ivy. You don't have to, Ivy said gently. Sometimes silence pushes louder than words. Outside, the wind began to rise, not fierce, but restless. Leaves skated across the porch. A chime knocked against the frame of the door. Later that day, Ivy stepped into the garden alone. It was where Harold used to sit in the evenings, an old bench beneath a cypress tree. She sat there now in the quiet, a folded letter in her lap, one Harold had written years ago, unopened until now. She unfolded it slowly. Ivy, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And it also means you came back, just like I hoped. They won't understand. Maybe not for a long time, but you were the only one who loved me with nothing to gain. Ivy looked out over the garden. The roses were just starting to bloom again. I don't need them to understand, she whispered. I just need to finish what you started. That evening, the house began to shift, not in noise, but in mood. The kind of shift you feel when people stop talking out loud and start speaking with glances. Marie stood in the upstairs hallway, staring at the closed door to Harold's study. She hadn't stepped inside since the funeral. It still smelled like his cologne, earthy, clean, faintly worn into the old leather chair he used to sit in. She opened the door slowly. Stacks of sketchbooks, journals, fabrics folded in neat piles. A photo of young Harold, arm around Ivy, maybe age 10, pinned to the corkboard near his desk. Marie stared at it. Something in her softened, then stiffened again. You gave her your heart, she whispered, but you gave us your standards. She didn't know which felt worse. Downstairs, Joel sat alone on the porch, flicking a coin between his fingers. He was the one who never asked for much, but maybe that's why no one ever gave him much either. He thought back to the last conversation he had with Harold. It had been about nothing. How's work? Harold had asked. Fine. You seeing anyone? Not really. You happy? Joel had hesitated. I'm fine, and Harold had nodded. But Joel had seen it, that flicker in Harold's eyes like he knew Joel wasn't. Inside, Ivy moved through the hallway barefoot. She wasn't snooping, she was remembering. Each room had a memory, not dramatic, not loud, but real. Her and Harold baking cookies and burning the first batch, helping him clean the fireplace, sitting at the stairs just to watch him paint. These weren't stories the others knew, because they didn't seem big enough to tell. But that was the thing about Harold. He didn't build his love in speeches, he built it in quiet things. That night, Marie and Thomas sat in the living room, not saying much. Marie finally spoke. You think she's really going to stay? Thomas didn't look up from his glass. She has nothing to leave for. Marie exhaled. Maybe that's why Harold gave her everything. He didn't give her everything, Thomas said. No, Marie nodded. Just the parts that mattered. Back in her room, Ivy looked out the window. The stars were faint, but they were there. She held the second letter in her hands, the one Harold had marked, only read when it's hardest. She didn't open it. Not yet. But soon. Something told her the hardest part was just beginning. The next morning, something shifted again. Not in the house, but in Ivy. She woke up before sunrise. The air was cool, the kind that pressed gently against the skin like a memory. She didn't open the letter yet, but she placed it carefully inside her sketchbook, right next to a small pencil drawing of Harold's smile. In the kitchen, Marie was already there. She had made coffee, not for anyone else, just for herself. But when she saw Ivy enter, she reached for a second cup. No words, just a silent offer. Ivy nodded once and took the cup. It was the first moment of peace between them. Joel shuffled in next, still in his hoodie, hair messy. "Morning," he said to no one in particular. He reached for the fridge, paused, then looked at Ivy. "Hey, there's something in the mailroom for you." Ivy blinked. "For me?" "Yeah, it's got your name, handwritten." A few minutes later, Ivy stood in the small mail nook near the front door. She opened the drawer, and sure enough, there was an envelope. Cream paper, slanted script, just her name on the front. Inside, a note, written in pencil. Neat, firm, not Harold's handwriting. Just 4 lines. "Some inherit houses, some inherit secrets. Look behind the painting in the study. You deserve to know the whole truth." Ivy froze. She read it twice, then again. Her heart thudded softly, not with fear, but with that odd mix of curiosity and dread. Who wrote it? And more importantly, what truth? An hour later, when the house was quiet, Ivy stepped into Harold's study. She closed the door gently behind her. The painting above the fireplace, Harold's favourite, was slightly askew. She climbed onto the small stool nearby and lifted the frame carefully. Behind it, a safe, small, old, and already open. Inside was a single brown envelope. On it, one word: Ivy. She sat down, opened it. Inside, a photo and a letter. The photo was old, a hospital room, a woman in a gown, Harold by her side, in the woman's arms, a baby, her. The letter was longer this time. "Ivy, I wasn't just your uncle, I was your father." Ivy didn't cry. Not at first. She just sat there, holding the letter with both hands, like it might disappear if she let go. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her face was still. Harold, her father. Not uncle, not guardian, father. And the woman in the photo, her mother, someone she had no memory of. Just a soft face, a gentle smile, and eyes that looked too much like Ivy's own. The letter was written with the same care Harold had always shown her. Not dramatic, not apologetic, just honest. "You were born in a moment I thought I'd never have again. Love, family, hope. But it wasn't simple. The world I lived in wouldn't have accepted you the way I needed them to. So I did what cowards do. I gave you to my sister, and I told myself it was protection. But it was fear." Ivy read it again and again. And the words didn't sting. They ached. That quiet ache of something that was lost before you even knew it was yours. She folded the letter slowly, slipped it back into the envelope, tucked it deep into her sketchbook next to the other one. And then she sat, not thinking, not deciding, just feeling. Outside the study door, Marie had passed by, heard nothing, but saw Ivy's silhouette through the glass. A stillness that made her pause. She didn't knock. But for the first time, she didn't feel the need to compete. Later that day, Ivy found herself in the garden again. The same bench beneath the cypress. This time Joel sat beside her. They didn't speak for a while. Then softly, "You okay?" Ivy nodded, then shook her head, then nodded again. "You ever feel like the ground you've been standing on wasn't really there?" Joel didn't pretend to know, but he offered something better. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small notebook. "I found this in Harold's drawer. It's full of sketches, clothes, designs, but in the back, it's all drawings of you." He handed it to her, and for the first time that day, Ivy cried. Not from pain, but from being seen. Truly, finally seen. The house was quieter than usual, but not the kind of silence that comes from emptiness. This was the kind that came when people started listening. Ivy sat in the sunroom, holding the 2 letters in her lap. The one Harold left in his will, and the one he never meant to share until the very end. She had read them both, felt the weight of both, and now she had a choice. She could say nothing, let things fade quietly, keep the truth locked inside like so many other things in this house. But silence, she realised, had never protected anyone. It had only made the walls thicker. That evening she asked for a family meeting. Marie, Thomas, Joel. Even the housekeeper paused to listen from the stairs. Ivy stood at the edge of the living room. No podium, no lawyer. Just her with Harold's letters in hand. "You all think Harold gave me everything," she began, voice steady. "The money, the house, the paintings on the wall." She paused. "But he also gave me something harder. The truth." She held up the photograph, the one of her as a baby in her mother's arms, Harold beside her. "He was my father." Gasps, silence, even Marie's breath caught. "He didn't tell anyone, not because he was ashamed of me, but because he was afraid of what this family would do to me. He wrote that in his letter. Thomas shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Joel looked away. Marie just stared at the photo. He left me this house, yes, but he also left me you. And I don't want to live here alone. Not out of fear, not out of revenge. So I'm asking for something simple. She looked at each of them. Start over. Not for the will, not for him, for us. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Joel stood. I'm sorry, he said. Not for what Harold did, but for what we didn't. Marie walked up slowly. She didn't say much, but she placed her hand gently over Ivy's. And for the first time, it wasn't out of duty, it was out of something softer. Something almost like love. In the weeks that followed, the house changed. Not in decoration, but in presence. Laughter returned to the hallway. Dinner became a shared thing again, not an obligation. Marie started teaching Ivy how to sew, like Harold once taught her. Joel helped Ivy start a foundation in Harold's name, not to boast, but to serve. And Thomas, he left for a while, but he wrote letters. Honest ones. That was a start. The final scene, Ivy in Harold's studio finishing one of his sketches, a dress he never completed. As she pins the last thread, she whispers, I think I understand now. Some people inherit money. Some inherit pain. But if you're lucky, you inherit hope. Sometimes what we inherit is not money, not titles, but the courage to tell the truth and the strength to love anyway. Thank you for staying with us through this quiet, winding story. Out of thousands of videos out there, you chose this one, and that means more than you know. If this story touched something in you, please consider liking, subscribing, or even just leaving a comment. Not for the numbers, but because stories like this deserve to be remembered. See you in the next one.